In the past few years, society has seen an incredible rise in artificial intelligence technology, a development that has forced almost all fields to adapt while sparking global debate about the role of artificial intelligence in our lives. In late 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT, a generative artificial intelligence tool that, as of August 2025, hit a benchmark of 700 million weekly users. As astutely noted by Stanford University's 2025 Artificial Intelligence Index report, AI is rapidly moving from the lab to daily life. However, artificial intelligence is just the latest technological change that has led society to readjust our ways of living. In the past century, changes in telecommunications, media forms, transportation, agriculture, computing, and health technology have redefined our systems and habits. In this podcast series, Control, Alt, Innovate, Perspectives on Technological Advancements, this uni-high oral history project sets out to understand how the rise of new technologies have impacted our lives over the past century. From Uni High, I'm Callie Cooper, a member of Class of 2026. This episode in our series is Logging On, Histories of Life Before and After Computers. In this podcast, we will explore the shifts in how technology has shaped our work, communication, and accessibilities over the past century. Through first-hand accounts, we'll examine the early days of manual typewriters, the advent of personal computers, and the rise of the internet and social media. The journey of technology has had far-reaching effects, from typewriters, which required a strong touch to push through ribbon ink, to floppy disks and hard drives, to the revolutionary graphical web browser Mosaic, created at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. These tools not only simplified tasks like word processing and communication, but they also fundamentally changed entire industries such as science, farming, libraries, and graphic design. Along the way, the internet blew doors open for many people to access information, connect, and communicate at speeds they never imagined. Along with these technological advancements, new questions would arise about accuracy, privacy, and safety. Champaign-Urbana resident Celia Elliott regularly used a typewriter for her schoolwork as a high school student in Tolono in the mid-1960s.
The summer before I was a freshman in high school, my mother decided I needed to learn how to type. I took typing at Central High School here in Champaign, and there was one other of my friends. The two moms took turns carpooling, driving us into Champaign every day and picking us up and driving us home so we could learn how to type. And they had these giant Underwood manual typewriters that you really had to push on the keys to get them to work. And my Little Smith's Corona was such an improvement over those big manual Underwood typewriters. I really felt like I had won the lottery, that I had my own typewriter and it was portable and usable.
Urbana resident Margaret Lovell recalls using a manual typewriter as a 1960s high schooler in Washington, D.C., and later transitioning to an electronic typewriter for work.
When I was in high school, we took a class in typing. Girls and boys both took a class in typing. And we had manual typewriters, but it means there was no electricity involved at all. It was a device that sat on a desk and had a roller and a dial on both ends, a handle on both ends, and you would put paper on the back side of the roller, and then you would turn the little handles and the paper would come up the front side of the roller, and then you would begin to type, and actual little pieces of metal that had the letters on the ends of them would smack the ribbon that had the ink on it, and then put the impression on the paper and then move over one character at a time. So that was what I learned to type on, and I was very bad at it. I typed 12 words a minute, and that was a ridiculously low low number of words per minute. So I never really got a job as a secretary, as a typist, as a result of that. And then they came out with electric typewriters, where they went faster. You didn't have to hit the keys as hard. And then they got more sophisticated, and they had a little ball that instead of a key, the little ball would rotate as you'd press a key. So you'd press W, and the little ball in the innards of the typewriter would move so that W was what was impressed on the paper.
Paula Kaufman, the first dean of libraries and university librarian at the University of Illinois from 1999 to 2013, remembers the challenge of making a mistake while using a typewriter.
It did not have an undo function. It did not have a delete function, and you had a ribbon in it. So you'd had to keep replacing the ribbon as it ran out or dried up or whatever, and you could get a ribbon that was just all black or a ribbon that had black on the top and red on the bottom. I worked a couple summers in an accountant's office, and we needed the red for deficits on the balance sheets. To undo a mistake, you had to use whiteout, or there was a piece of paper too, some kind of papery thing that you would put in, and it would white out if you just had made a mistake like on one letter. Otherwise, you had to use this stuff that came in a bottle that looked like a bottle of nail polish.
Several interviewees lived through the introduction of computers, first used in places of work starting in the 1960s and later for personal use. Early computers operated very differently from computers we use now.
Computers used to be as big as this room, and they used to have their own air conditioning system because they generated so much heat. And the way you talked to computers back then was either through tape that had little holes punched in it or cards that had holes punched in them. You would program the hole puncher. You didn't program the computer. You programmed the hole puncher, and then the cards were fed into the computer, and the computer did whatever computations you'd ask it to do. So my first computer experience was working with the punch cards.
Retired university librarian Paula Kaufman also recalls using punch cards in the early days of computers. Cards pierced with holes representing data that would then be fed into a computer to be read and processed. Here she reflects on early mainframe computers.
So when I worked at Columbia as the head of the business library, the punch card machine was right outside my office. It was not fun. It was very noisy.
The advent of computers revolutionized the workplace, transforming how professionals communicated, stored data, and performed tasks. For many, the shift meant more efficiency, but for others, it presented a learning curve that required adaptation. Lovell recalls her first personal computer, acquired in the mid-1970s.
I would guess it would have been maybe 1974. My husband and I bought a IBM, what they called a PC, a personal computer, for our business. And programming was still in DOS. I mean, I had to learn how to talk to the computer, and did. And then there were these applications, and I don't remember, you didn't download anything. I mean, you bought the disk.
John Dudley, professor emeritus in the Department of Crop Sciences, remembers the first time he acquired a computer at work to assist with research.
At the university, we had access to a mainframe that we could use. I had graduate students who worked on that mainframe. I decided, well, I've got a good deal here. I've got all these people doing work for me. Why should I start using a personal computer? But then one of my students managed to get some money as a grant, and what he wanted to do with it was buy me a personal computer, so I started doing some of the work. And actually, that was a good thing. It meant that I could do a lot more in terms of calculations. And for my research, that was a big deal because we dealt with a lot of numbers. And it made it a lot easier for me to communicate with people. Now, on the negative side, it meant that I did a lot of my own typing because I used to have a secretary that did all the typing for me. But it was better that I did it myself because it was quicker. I was saving time that way.
Paula Kaufman recalls her first work computer when she worked at Columbia University's library in New York City.
I applied for the job as the head of services at the Columbia Libraries, which was like the second person in charge. And all of the public-facing services reported to me. And part of my negotiations since 1982 for my job was for a computer, because we did not have computers in our offices. And I was given a DEC computer, digital equipment company computer, that had all of the software integrated into it. We didn't have PowerPoint, and nothing was in color, but there was a word processor, there was a spreadsheet of sorts, there was an unusable database system. I mostly used it for word processing, and it had 8-inch floppy disks and no backup. So I wrote my first annual report very proudly on this thing, and it crashed and it got lost.
Kaufman also shares how in early days of digital library systems, institutions struggled to implement technology that was functional and user-friendly.
At Columbia, we implemented an integrated online catalog system. Catalog records did not magically, get into these systems. They had to be entered. And we contracted with a company called Bibliotech, which had 6 big customers. And Columbia is one of the major libraries, so it was one of the customers. And they went bankrupt because they tried to personalize or customize for each of its customers. And, tell us you can customize, and yes, we'll ask for it. And they never charged us to customize. It was just part of the package. So they went bankrupt, and then we had to figure out what in the world we were going to do. Other libraries tried to build their own systems. And in fact, we did here. I wasn't here at the time, but we did. I was still at Columbia back in the 80s. We worked with a big publisher called Elsevier that had an experiment to put science and medical journals on CD-ROM. And we found, I think there were a half a dozen or so faculty members, and asked them to try it out. So each one had this big computer thing, and they hated it. It was much easier for them to use the medical journals in paper that they were used to using than this thing that was always breaking down, and they always had to find the right disk to put in, and it was a pain.
The introduction of the internet and email would become another technological revolution. The internet, first developed in the 1960s by the U.S. government's Advanced Research Project Agency, ARPA, and email, first invented in 1971 by American Ray Tomlinson, was introduced more widely to American society in the 1990s, providing a new gateway to information. With the internet, access to knowledge rapidly began to shift as information became available at a click of a button. Local Central Illinois farmer Dennis Wenger of Fairbury reflects on his early memories of using web browsers to access the internet. Web browsers, first launched in the 1990s, played a crucial role in integrating the internet into American society by allowing people to easily access the World Wide Web.
I was probably at an age old enough that it was just hard to comprehend what we're actually accessing. My mother, who's much older than me, would say, well, is it a big book, or is it an encyclopedia, or is it a dictionary? What is it? And those things probably almost were going through my head when they first talk about accessing the internet.
The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign played a crucial role in creating one of the first widely available web browsers, Mosaic. Developed on campus at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, NCSA, and released in 1993, Mosaic pioneered integrating text and graphics and overall improving usability, a crucial step for allowing non-computer geeks to also access the web. Colleen Bushell, now a senior research scientist at NCSA, worked for NCSA as a graduate student on the development of Mosaic. She reminisces about the complexities of sharing information on the internet before the development of an easy-to-use web browser.
At the time, before Mosaic, there were several different methods for sharing information over the internet. And so it could be something called FTP, which was File Transfer Protocol. That was a way to share files. There was something called WAIS, W-A-I-S. There were a few others now that I'm forgetting. And there was HTTP, which is what the web uses, or the markup language. So there were all these different ways that you could move things around at the internet, and each one had their own kind of tool to use, or own software to use. So part of the goal of Mosaic was, instead of it being that you had to use all of these different pieces, how about creating one tool that you could use to use all of those techniques and then be able to more easily share files. And we were thinking of it primarily for supporting scientists in sharing documents that they needed to share. And so what was decided is that HTTP, the www markup language, HTTP language, was going to be the basis of how that browser would show information. And so it was the first one that then combined all of those and created one way to kind of look at all of those. So each of those were individually created by some other group, but it was brought together in the first browser called Mosaic.
The team faced key design challenges, like keeping the interface clean while including branding. They solved this with an animation logo. Another challenge was helping users create web pages, leading to the View Source feature, which encouraged learning. Mosaic also had to work across Windows, Mac, and Unix to ensure its accessibility.
At the same time, some of the leadership at NCSA wanted us to put the NCSA logo on the software, but at that time I was fighting that a lot because I thought it would add too much clutter. We didn't want a lot of clutter on the interface. And so the compromise was that I used the logo as the way to show that information was being transferred. So we had kind of an animated globe would spin when the information was being transferred. So that wasn't so much challenging, but it was one that we had to, debate and promote and ended up creating. The other one I would say a big challenge was that we were afraid that people wouldn't know how to create web documents and be able to then use the tool. And we did not want to create an entire editor for creating documents. And so what we did as a compromise is we put a feature in Mosaic that was called View Source, which meant click on it and now you can open up that same document but see all the coding that was done for that document to make it look the way it looks, as a way to help people learn themselves how to create documents. And that, I think, really helped it grow fast because people that wanted to do it could just share examples and kind of figure it out on their own. At that time, we would also have to have software that would work on different kinds of computers. So a Microsoft Windows computer, an Apple, and then something called Unix. And so one thing that was tricky was how much to make them all look the same or different.
Instead of waiting for a formal launch, the developers released new features as soon as they were ready. Early users provided rapid feedback, which helped shape the browser's development. As popularity grew, coordination became more structured.
Mark Andreessen, who was leading that effort, he just started releasing it as soon as he had different features ready to go that he wanted to share. And he put it out there to the public, for free. And a lot of people adopted it very quickly. And so in the beginning, he was getting hundreds of messages a day from people saying that they like this, try that, all giving suggestions. So there wasn't really a plan of, okay, we're not going to release it till a certain time. Initially, Mark would just release it as soon as he had something ready. Eventually, when we had to start coordinating the different features and the different software across different platforms, then we had to coordinate more.
Soon after the release of Mosaic, Bushell and her colleagues sought to showcase examples of kinds of things you could do with the internet. Before she knew it, she was working on a project requested by Al Gore, the Vice President of the United States.
At the beginning, most of the kinds of things people would do would be almost like a small brochure, be kind of short information on one page, or it would be a place you could go to find files. And so we wanted to do some projects to show how you could do more with it. And so I do remember getting an email from our director, Larry Smarr, who said, can you work with the vice president on creating these ideas that we had of doing a virtual office? And the whole time I thought, when our director was talking about it, that he meant the vice president of one of the companies that worked with us, like Eli Lilly or Caterpillar. And it wasn't until I got the email forwarded that said Albert Gore at the end, I thought, oh, that vice president. So it was very exciting. We worked with someone from his office, created a virtual office space. So it was a way to kind of show another way of how you can use the internet. The scenario was people working on policy development, how they could share documents, so like an archive of files, but then they could also chat with each other. And that was something new too. We called it the water cooler, which was supposed to mimic the idea of just running into people in the hallway and having casual conversations, which is now just what you do with texting and iMessage kind of thing all the time. We organized them into more like an office space kind of virtual building. So it was fun. Then we use that as a model to create other sorts of environments for people.
By December 1993, the New York Times featured an article about Mosaic on the cover of its business section. The article trumpeted that, quote, Mosaic's many passionate proponents hail it as the first killer app of network computing, an applications program so different and so obviously useful that it can create a new industry from scratch. Other web browsers would follow: Netscape, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, Edge, and today's dominant browser, Google Chrome. Access to the World Wide Web would transform almost every profession. The journey of computers and the internet has dramatically changed from primitive mainframes and punch card systems to today's sophisticated digital networks. Regardless of technological changes, its main purpose has always been to improve the accessibility and efficiency of communication. Computers have reshaped the world of work, starting from transforming libraries and academic research to changing publishing, design, and engineering. While opening up endless possibilities, they also introduce new challenges in credibility, security, and accessibility. The influence of technology will continue to expand in the future, so its functions in simplifying processes, enhancing collaboration, and increasing knowledge will continue to strengthen. Thank you for listening to Logging On, Histories of Life Before and After Computers, an episode in the series Control, Alt, Innovate, Perspectives on Technological Advancements, a student-produced podcast by Uni High's Oral History Project team. All interviews featured in this podcast were conducted in spring 2024 by Uni's 8th grade class. If you'd like to listen to previous episodes of Control, Alt, Innovate, Perspectives on Technological Advancements, check out the WIL website at will.illinois.edu/Illinois Youth Media.